So nirvana really was where bliss is, and not being blissful, but being in bliss would be, from having achieved things, and eye awareness was your emptiness, and care simple, and so you would be receptive. And so in the past, Wikaninji and Komita Vida or Div Smart or Life Food has principles that relate to your fluids being thin, and when it's not, of course, it's called cystic fibrosis. But being in eye awareness is causative more of calcium and sodium balance, because adrenaline and cortisol, all these stress hormones, adrenocorticotropic hormone, epinephrine, norepinephrine, all are not necessary because someone's more, at peace and the shoulders are relaxed and everything. And so, as you're in balance, you've really got this empty center, and it's just simple that you have care there. And power, somebody could be asked, where is your power? I mean, it's a really good question, because if you use whole brain functioning motor programming, you could see that where a pattern interrupt is, your power really is your formlessness in a moment, and how functional plastic that you are to be in your creative intelligence. I mean, this engages more of a whole brain patterning, including the frontal cortex. And so automatically you have this, and this is pre-cognition, pre-thinking. So something has gone on long before you thought, and it's engaged, and a structure is, and that structure could really be more where functionalness is, or fear could be placed as an addiction all throughout, where something is stored wrongfully. And so somebody could do a new behaviour generator and be where the behavioural change work can be in a small session, and that be cleared up. But something could be future-paced, meaning that someone could have learned how to have something which could be then future-paced, so when you arrive in the future, it's automatic. And something that you've done is to use a synesthesia, which, though a pattern as a structure is used, that's separate from something you've been processing. You're using that structure to process something new. And this is sort of how the brain works. In whole brain functioning, you're modeling really a condition of being able to calibrate movement experience to internal matrix of the mind. And so where somebody does anything, in fact, you can see what the nerves are that's behind this. And that's whole body calibration, as you're looking at whole body movement, and this through space, you're learning how to track, and you're getting sensory-based information more. And so 90% of anything that anybody's communicating is right there, more in the analog, meaning not the words per se, but how they're being said. And so if somebody cared, they could go forward and they really learn how to do certain sorts of mind reading techniques, like implicit and explicit mind reading technique, and you learn how to apply implicit and explicit language as well. And math has existed in the words that you use, and how you have your focus and attention. And so an increase in well-being always was, after these trainings, there would be a satisfaction of life index looked at before and afterward, and quite considerable right through the rest of your life. You really have a great benefit. And so there's an increased well-being, and it's spontaneous creative intelligence, that interest and pleasure is what allows you, and happiness, to be in the frontal cortex. And that could be more hardwired, which we're going to be talking a little bit about, and what happens when aversion, as we just started talking a bit about, had been placed into all these centers. Of course, power is equivalent to your formlessness and your ability to be able to be functionally plastic in the moment. And so there's ranges and ways that somebody can achieve things. Like, for instance, if you just shape the body, the mind can follow what this is. if you put a new movement experience in and wire that into someone's experience, now the mind can conceive new possibility, you see. And so life with nutrition and installing a new movement experience with a session that somebody can have, it's really your capacity to be more aware, being in balance, and being able to have a referential indexing, meaning where are you getting your information from? Is it 50% inside yourself? Is it 50% outside? And are you at balance about this? And also then your whole orientation. Is this more internal or external? And is it in balance? And so where somebody's seen to be in balance, you really could say that you've got someone that's more integrated, meaning all the parts are flowing. It's congruent, meaning that all the parts are parallel. And it's associated, meaning it's in the present, and you're using is as a verb more, and this sort of thing. So now cortisol is modest. Because don't, well, can't, should, try, but must isn't there. And learning is immediate, of course, and imprinting where the mind is. And if you could see that you gutted the mind, you come to mind the gut, and you realise these two things are very much connected, because 50% of all the dopamine is made in the brain of the gut, and 90% of all serotonin is made in the brain of the gut.
Yeah, I was reading today your book that I'm editing for metabolic neuropathy, and just what you said just now reminded me of it, because it was the part that I was up to said that anxiety was basically magnesium deficiency.
Yes, well, where somebody has a behaviour that robs magnesium from the body, always, never not, someone's going to have a deficiency, aren't they? Because the behaviour is the cause of the condition. A condition causes the behaviour. The behaviour is the condition and causes things to arise because of itself. Cystic fibrosis, of course, where fear, fight is there. Somebody could all of a sudden not really have any saliva for sure, or they could be so that they've got so much because they've got their rewards on and they're only thinking about things of reward, and so they have very high histamine levels, and so the membranes are very permeable, but they're very quick knee-jerked in their activities or not. But balance, of course, but where sodium and potassium and chlorine channel is, it always is that this channel, because of rock salt, because you could only have wind-evaporated solar ocean salt, and if it's collectible from the cold water, you've got about 92 trace elements in there. And it's enzymatically active, and it's orthophilic, meaning straight with nature, and it's amphiphilic, meaning it can be mixed with water and oil. It's amphoteric, meaning it can pull a north or a south out where it needs to, and it has permittivity, which means that it can pass a charge and hold a charge. So silica and carbon are the very few two elements which really do this on the periodic chart course, which carbon is what we have in our body, and silica is necessary in its monatomic state, meaning it's north negative and it's south positive and neutralized more, and it doesn't have any valence. And so these elements like rhodium, osmium, and ruthenium, all these white gold elements, form a glow around your cells. But when you're looking at cystic fibrosis, because you've got excessive don't work, can't, should, try, but must only, and somebody only had a cortisol, adrenaline sorts of types of things going on, EU stress, even people having too much fun, you've got what's not necessarily natural. Being in bliss is what we're talking about here, but being blissful is really, that's something else. Being in bliss is what we're talking about versus just being blissful. But happiness itself, we would go beyond to see that this is more encompassing, yet pleasure is sort of something just in the moment, something sensory. Yet the cause of your septal region of your brain that's engaged where you're involved in pleasure, this causes your frontal cortex to be connected, and the frontal cortex left hemisphere is connected more to the front of the brain and the back of the brain, and so you've got a much more flow to connect to the front to the back of the brain for action and things to be taken, and for new things and ideas to form, it always uses the frontal cortex more for the plannedness of that. And so you can hear and see, of course, in analog, meaning non-verbal, the way that something is said. If there's a slight slur or rolledness, people can really feel comfortable. And if it were really clipped, like, you're going to learn this, and this is what is going to be fished or given to you. But that's an example of sort of clipped sort of language, which is coming from adversity and the adverse components of the brain where somebody's really talking in clipped language, like, you're going to do this and you better get on with it. I mean, that's pretty sort of gross. But it's really where a lack of room is inside and somebody's really not coming from the note G, and their chakras aren't open, because you can really hear that resonance isn't quite where, in the upper nasal area or the dental areas of your mouth and glottal areas, the three areas, which are all have resonance. And so you could either hear through resonance someone who's sipping nectar and you're making 26 grams of protein every day in your intestine, that you have the proper intestinal flora. I mean, dopamine is produced because you've got streptococcus sorts of cocci types of organism, which is in our BCT formula, we've got these blue-like organisms which assist to help dopamine being produced. But there's aromatics, which is missing in food, which because all the aromatics is missing, it means that all the enzyme is missing, because if you've really got an enzyme there, you've still got aromatics, but if you don't have aromatics, you don't have enzymes. And there's a law of adaptive secretion of enzymes, so life begets life, of course, and death begets death. And so up to a certain point, live food, you could really learn that's not much phosphate, because that really creates stone, and it's stone in the pancreas, and it's really where sodium chloride and calcium can be in excess. So cortisol, don't work, can't, should, try, but must only. As you could go back and look and listen to these shows, you could hear that always causes a thickening of mucus more itself, because it's causes sodium to be excreted and causes high calcium. And so those two things has really caused mucin to become thickened. And so rather than be thinned and have a good surface exchange, somebody really hardly sort of all of a sudden is really not getting any oxygenation like they really should. And so you've got adversity, which could be being sought, which is not proper direction of the vestibular system. Succession could be done to cause the vestibular system to be used correctly, so someone has proper emotional regulation. But where a lack of integration really is because the parts are less than flowing and unified where things are, which they could be, but that part has to be isolated and separated so it could be worked with versus it's just overlaid. And somebody, within a short moment in time, they could be so skillful, which I could train people how to do this. There's Jubb's instrument, which teaches people whole brain functioning. These words are never ever coined ever before this moment where, this work was being done more as to be looking into whole brain functioning itself, and it was seen that the septal region connects the frontal cortex, and if aversion was, it would have neurologically inhibited the septal region of the brain, which is responsible for pleasure. And so pain that triggers the amygdala and tegmentum by degree, or inhibits the frontal cortex, it shuts that down, because you can't have really good feelings while you feel, a bit buggered at the same time, sort of thing. So where someone's pancreas is not flowing like it should, which cystic fibrosis is a rock salt toxicity and a slow, sure lack of capacity to transport chloride molecule properly. And so the sweetness of the pancreas, which could be just assisted with a little bit of this Jubb's amber glycolic, could return sweetness back to the pancreas, and somebody only has to have 1, 2, 3 doses of what this is that last over 3 months or more.
Wow.
Yeah, so and you put the blue light therapy, and you do that work. So it only takes like 3 hours. The treatment is, and that can last three months. Somebody could do 3 of those in a row, and they've got quite substance that would continue to cause neoplastic condition and things to be cleared up. And it's purgative, it kicks it out. And so all things where it's something of the body is something where the mind is also. And so if you could describe what short-term hypnotherapy is, it really is just structured, inductive process where somebody's giving instruction that gets carried out, and that's a true healing therapeutic. And so somebody really could be very knowledgeable how a synesthesia could be used to clear away a stuck state. So providing the resource state is built up, large enough, you can collapse the stuck state into this. And where you're really in your omnipresent self, meaning in your third person, you're looking over yourself more, you're outside and you're having a thought about the thoughts you could see, you're having awareness over sensation, and you're having, because being wakeful is only 7 plus or minus 2 chunks of information in one period of time, it's very limited. And so awareness is over the state of wakefulness itself. And so where somebody learns the vestibular system to be what more is whole brain functioning, you're moving more toward using direction this way, and you're using direction to have things within, and you're doing these preferred modes where you're more inclusive of the things that you do, and you're seeking agreement. And if you could, you should be really seeking agreement. And so where new toxin really is, where the body was brought in of glutamate molecules, which is excitotoxic, and it suddenly caused a change of the sodium chloride channel because the glutamate molecule was really toxic and couldn't be broken down and could give a stimulation. But after baby food was given, 90% mostly of all these pyramidal motor neurons could have been lost. And so someone's capacity to be able to imitate what somebody else did doesn't exist as much. And these kids often really have phlegm and mucus, which cause their eyesight not to be so good, and upper respiratory types of conditions. And it is a sodium chloride channel into membrane, which gets healed up with the amber glycolic and these product, which we have in the program. But attention deficit hyperactive disorder really is primarily a sodium chloride channel into membrane in not proper regulation, which is what cystic fibrosis is. And so this is a condition that's behind everything in all neoplastic condition as well. And so the behaviours and things of inattention because of a hyperactiveness and an impulsivity, it could have blocked, of course, somebody's proper development and had degrees, which it was and is still going of cystic fibrosis that nobody ever talked about, which is really evident. And if you look into the symptoms of this, and so very interruptive types of internal dialogue which could be going on would be from this cortisol type of brain set, which is a don't work, can't should, try but must only, an aversive type of selective restrictive violation, meaning that although somebody could do something else, they've selected more to have only restrictive violations, like where they'll only focus on stories which is really something didn't work out, or it was sexist, to blame him, or some other condition of a story which didn't have any proper motive whatsoever, yet for the listener. And so to act without thought, which you could hear going on around, you could see that the consequence isn't something which should be wise, that somebody's tuned to more, and focusing on what you're able to versus what you're unable to, and what's going on where that chatter is. It's really a focus of where you could see behaviours, certainly like of fidgeting, for instance, which would show inner conflict and little micro expressions being released, which you could see also in a conflict, where typical expressions would be like 4 or 5 seconds or something. And so somebody becomes way more expert at being able to look and see what even parts of the brain that somebody is using. And that's what Jupp's instrument does. It gives you the capacity to be able to determine the degree to which somebody is in whole brain patterning or not. And you're looking at first how associated somebody is, yes, and who's done anything like this. It's really, meaning is somebody present tense versus dissociated? What's the congruency of the mood? And then what is it, the hemispheres that's participating in the mood? And how is all this related on an instrument that somebody could learn to look at others' behaviour and determine the degree to which somebody's more acting and living and more whole brain functioning? Somebody could do a session, and that's a download, so somebody could get new behaviour generator and get wired in a proper patterning that could be. And so neurotoxin really impacts the sodium chloride channel, which really impacts all these neurotransmitters and all the endothelial cells, which are cells which line the passageways of the cells. And so where somebody really doesn't have proper attention, it is that they can feel not that life going forward is proper, and so, or that they've just focused on historicalness or hystericalness and brought anything that was in the past and put it into the front of themselves, so just having ran into that in the past. But one doesn't have to have done that anymore. Those are behaviours which we've just been really talking about, which really is more hyperactive, and it's impulsivity, which really blocks that development, like we were talking about. Cystic fibrosis really at a very early age is really evident and ongoing and interruptive, of course, of the causedness of a lot more internal dialogue from estrogenicness. And the more estrogen somebody has, the more chatty-catty they could be, sort of with their internal dialogue in relation to somebody else. And so aversive, selective, restrictive types of violations of behaviour, meaning that you wouldn't do this ordinarily, but somebody is doing it because they might not have any boundaries. And so somebody has a private life, of course, and they'll just bring all of that private life into the public and do things just like this. It's sort of like domestic terrorists, sort of where the family is or something. And so the acts of where somebody is not in proper whole brain patterning could be truly a thought of some lacked consequence, in fact, actual, because somebody really wasn't able to feel guilt or feel shame, and because those emotions were, no, you can't, you shouldn't, that's weak, and so the consequence of that would be that somebody's only got rules that they could be broken, because, well, what's the consequence after that? There isn't, you see. And so because no shame, guilt, or embarrassment would have been, its resourcefulness is, you learn what's social. Otherwise, you could be started, or you could see social disorders where excessive inner or outer dialogue is, and somebody doesn't even know what the difference is between inner and outer dialogue, because the left hemisphere is shut down and only the right hemisphere is existing, and so one is not really having access as much to the external world, where the left hemisphere really does that through language exchange and through our kinesthetic motor sequencing sort of behaviour. And so unable where somebody would have been to be in aversion, and it shut down all the frontal cortex, because aversion neurologically inhibits pleasure. And, anything pleasure is only going to be equal to 1 in a bank account, but aversion can be as equal to like -3. And so, of course, why not have +5 to equal 1 adversive condition? Because you've got to build that up and chain these anchors together and fire it off, so somebody's got quite a resource state to collapse any stuck state into. But somebody could really learn how to do some things like this in sort of really short term whole brain functioning session, which somebody could really be downloaded where something is. So apart from reading where you could feel where everything is, what's going on in the body, you can really also hear and feel and see what's useful. That could be a syntax in the way you're using your senses and things. And so these are things which all cause more nectar to flow, and where ghrelin and natural levels of human growth hormone, which can cause you to be younger. And whole brain functioning patterning engages more vestibular movement toward and within, and not outside and away from, which is more dissociated. So overall, some patterns exist where fixatedness would have been on angry, sad baby types of happiness or helplessness, and somebody always getting many others to do something which is it something which somebody should be done themselves, and where maturity is, but somebody's asking others to do what that is for them, and this is sort of learned helplessness. But where eye contact really is, behaviour really is repetitive, that's inclusive, or it's not, it's restrictive and by habit polarised. And so information could be flowing because somebody's selected to be more congruent, and they could be sorting for what is agreement, or they can have agreement with condition, or they could be polarised. And so those are the only three choices that exist. Certain, the first two choices is really something which people you could get things done. And so syntax, what you do, or anybody else's mental health, really is an order or a disorder. And of course, they don't want to come to a tribe but must only, and fear not in the right place, because Bambi doesn't forget where the tiger is cortisol not proper. But having compassion and being more co-creative, focusing on being more consistent, and focusing on what's cared for, where change or transformation is really giving you back the keys versus the lack of self-control and the lack of the frontal cortex activity, which could be much more appropriately put, which you got the use of it, versus inappropriate, where one's not really following through with commitment, one's very impulsive, and very impulsive thrill sort of thought, which is toxic toward anybody, just like lead would be. And abuse is emotional, and things that's heavy and hard sort of sink to the bottom versus the things which is light more. But blatant, just constructing things which wasn't coming from memory, and repeating those things ongoing, one could really be skillful to learn to see from your movement experience everything that's sort of really going on and so on. But gaslighting is really done to the victim, where someone is, because who's the victor doesn't want to be seen that way. And so, where you are as a victim, these are all sorts of antisocial types of patterning, must be gaslighted, so it's your fault sort of thing. And the victim really is all which doesn't have anything come into question per se, which is the nature, not the cause and effect, but the nature of the cause and effect. What's the nature of the cause and effect? There's things which can't be brushed over, because only truth-telling is right in there. Because there's a certain percentage of time spent speaking about all sorts of things that was going on beforehand and then afterward also, which could be often lost by someone who's just fabricated and made something up. So mental blanking and not having even ability about a recall in neurology, that's called bradyphrenia. And it's sort of slow cognitive delayed response. And some comedians might do that sort of state sort of thing. But sodium chloride channel really dysfunction is there, and control of the emotion really is because you've got a great capacity for proper mental cognition, or you don't. But if you're using your brain right, you've got direction going proper. But otherwise, you've got an attention deficit hyperactive disorder, which is really a loss of mirror motor neuron function, like we said earlier on. And boys often are really affected much more than girls because their blood-brain barrier hasn't formed properly up until 19 months of age. And so there you go, where the family system court is. It's wrecked a nation and people and broken the family. And so you've got a lot of surrogate spousal relationships where parental alienation really is installed, and a lot of global tegmentum amygdala types of function, which somebody's ex was what was imprinted to who was there even by the age of 7. Some condition exists, and they must be happy that not anything is said and all sorts of things, which isn't really too normal, because you'd be wondering, gee, shouldn't it be that people talk to each other? But lots of food stuff which help for where anyone is to help be recovered more. These aromatics, and you've got enzyme in formula, and the stereoscopics are really good. So vitamin D, getting in the sun, all of these sorts of things really is good for you. The black amber balm is incredible and has DMT molecules that's within that. You could have quite a beautiful state change from this by sniffing what that is. The black amber glycolic has molecules in it which, if that's brought in internally, it really is incredible purgative. So one isn't any longer self-focused, you see, because available energy is now for spiritual conditioning versus it had to be there for healing, or it had to be there to get healed up, or digestion. And the conversion of energy otherwise really is being sought, and it's a risk where anybody is to the lack of any proper employedness, and where bright lights, for instance, suddenly can be cause of someone to be feel anxiety. Attention deficit hyperactive disorder really is helped with digestate and ECT and 4NR, life colloid. The black amber balm would be talking about. These are all products which really do assist and help heal up DNA where organs are, because otherwise Lewy body dementia and little bodies of protein that should be broken down and isn't, but where things are like that, where you've got unpredictable sort of mood swings and slow to be able to bring in new information, and speech where there's no gap in the cloud bank and it's just like flat strap somewhat. Where clip language would be, you've got it certain that you've got a hyperactive disorder and a lack of proper pleasure and interest. And so where somebody really is feeling in touch, of course, yet where somebody is in a state like that, this which we're talking about could really be a bit too intense where it even touches. And so persistence and perseverance, and yours and my capacity to really be in more compassion and be celebratory where we are, we could really reach out to others and assist to help healing. Life begets life, and death begets dead. It's really what was in your head a lot getting cleared up and being more silent, and what's there where the product is and service is more. So these are things which always start as the true healing therapeutic, because it's really more you or I, more changing our ways. But today, surrogate spouse relatedness, where the spouse wasn't there anymore and that relation was surrogated to the children, and then there was sort of emotional, incestual sorts of things where parental alienation goes on. One parent becomes the ex, and so forever and a day, anything that comes up, you can hear borrowed phrases that can be used that is labeling things. And where did this come from? It's just automatic. It's typical that often who's been alienated as a parent might always be the alienated one. and they've been, if they, if somebody, you wanted them to do something, and it was the kids all really enjoyed this, but then when the other parent was, and they didn't care for that, subliminally, suddenly you heard the kids say, "Oh, big deal, we didn't want to do this anymore." And so to the parent that's ostracized, they often are ostracized all the way through life, and that injury is something which can often be an injury sort of for life more. And the victim always doesn't want to be the end of the stick, and so they sure do learn what the victor did, and so they've got all these control things and ways to control people by being dissociated, by being distracted, by interrogatory, and being intimidated into control versus being motivational where people are. And so it's a math which is going on, and certain parenting is going to cause, things to be more set for someone. The black amber glycolic really is internal, and it's such a purgative, like I said, and it can clear away conditions where anger was and where projections are. It completely cause someone to be more blissful in their own thinking for the time frame that they do this, and then afterward it's sort of very purgative. Otherwise, it's really you're picking up more whole brain functioning patterning and learning about this and having a really good effect for your health. Otherwise, you can see what's going on. That would have been a lot of cortisol instead. And so it's really correcting what's successful to be for the dance that you do. And that actual, by the age of 7, really, there's something which is some guided critique of things. And so that's natural set. But if it's not, then any critique could be kind of considered as some grilling, or if the child feels alienated from the parent, they only would hear and see things and interpret things in a manner that's not necessarily total of itself. And catchphrases and things you could hear came from a parent that really had it as a business that they were going to punish the other parent and use the children to do that, you see. So these are things which is going on where you could see attention deficit disorder and these sorts of things because home life wasn't as well as what it should be, and refusing to consider this and have personal attention to and that the value of being able to feel shame and have blame, and then you've got no longer just rules that you could break. So sabotage is where sabotage mostly people sabotaging themselves because they got a lot of don't work, can't try about my son. It's really inhibitory. Yet interest and pleasure cause you to be in your frontal cortex. And so the pleasure is stimulating a whole brain patterning, and aversion cause you to be in limited mind function. And otherwise, where somebody's in aversion, they're more aggressive, they really want to, something, they'll demand where someone is doing a job and they'll make whoever does that kind of feel small, and they're living, and that who is there wants anyone else around to live in the shadow of themselves, and this sort of thing. So it's sort of very Peter principled, meaning somebody sort of promoting their own self to some utter sort of incompetence, really. And so someone could really say that they could care. Oh, good, how's that? And they have an empty center. Wow, this is I-aware, and all things come more appropriate, and what's empty where energy is within, and formlessness then can be, because functional plasticity is, but otherwise somebody could be sort of saying that they're sorry, yet they really don't, you can't hear, feel, and see that they exist per se, and that could be more manipulative, and that's an example of gaslighting, where someone doesn't really feel that you could be hurt, or they don't have any capacity to feel empathic much. And so these are all moments where someone might be turning some behaviour on or off, called more selective restrictive. I mean, yet where somebody's just only had their X, what was that? Some condition in myself which got passed on to the children. And if it was how beautiful your mother is and how good your carer is actually to, or father, to not get in the way of the child toward this parent and things, how good is that you might reduce to a lot of the parental alienation that could have gone on for your own self, and what sort of reunification could there be? And yet a very deep condition could be a lack of proper having sympathy and conflicting of self, and incapable really of not really having easy ability about it, maybe hug or kiss somebody or feel somebody else. And so varying degrees of isolation and sort of normalising something which is deviant goes on where the child is. I mean, they're not, that sometimes those things could be got to. Yet the act of unreasonableness really is what your neighbour could look and feel and say, well, yeah, no, I think that's unreasonable. But one could not really ever be admitting, for instance, which they should, normally would, to feelings of what is run away or some escape route where no confessedness would have been yet all kept there in that mode, sort of somebody guessing and things, which is sort of abusive. So covert sort of pursuit really could have been more toward disorder rather than order, and where somebody would have been holding another down, more subservient and vulnerable to that, to some weakness, and then so constantly accusing it's sort of like a passive aggressor, which is sort of really fatal, actually, and it's the lack of any empathics by some sort of a degree, really. And so there are four stages of a personality disorder where that is. And first, of course, you've got an idealisation of a stage, and then you're moving to the second stage, which is really a negating of any distinction which would have existed there, starting to cause a deluded and devalued sort of relation. And that's the second phase. And then going through a third phase, which is, you're getting discarded and tossed away. And so the fourth stage really has become sort of a hoover after that, and sucking up all energy, which really could be out to drain otherwise. But yet all empathy, which should be, yet, you could often see maybe no empathy really is being shown, you see. So this sort of shows antisocialness, but for the record, you could really say that fabrication and the part of a false story, of course, always is because no proper sequence was in the way that it was told and would ordinarily be, but somebody could be more forensic and you can tune into whether something is truthful or not. And so it's really made up where a portion is only, and somebody only hears or sees something being spoken, but not everything. And you've got infobecedent connecting with an infobecedent about something hearsay, and this is nothing ever verified where this is, or your own self is. But aggressing to provoke where somebody is or to intimidate them, and one ever having to feel that they have a right to do that, which is ridiculous. This is sort of an example of what is totally antisocial. And so it's a constant admiration where otherwise something is going on which is abnormal, and it really is self-centered. And where somebody is like that, they're just terrified of revealing the truth, because the loss of that is really what the whole personality disorder is about, where something could be revealed and somebody doesn't want it. Then you're looking at all sorts of things which is given to you, or are like slippery slope, where somebody's gone on to think that something exists which no fact existed for that to have existed. And you've got angry baby and sad baby, you've got niggling at people and then sobbing, crying, and you've got a baby as an adult, and you've got positive adaptive reasonings that all was, this having formed, and by silence and withdrawal, and somebody could be being punished ongoing, and a silent sort of treatment of some punishedness, and you could really say that covert, meaning somebody who's more passive aggressive, personality disorder. Really, you could think for the record, you could see behaviours like certainty, so to be a big exaggerated sense of self, and self-centeredness, and bursts of energy coming up with more not too controlled energy of breaking into other people's boundaries, and being very manipulative, and not really being very reliable or loyal, and yet fully hyped up of attention, and over conflict, and conflict being sought. And so, all this is really not useful use of direction of a vestibular sense. So where anything is, you've got to build a resource state which is large enough, and then you can collapse anything into this. And so what personality disorder, you could say, well, first, what could you do to turn things around? You could straight away look at the hard facts more, and you could look at all the sorts of behaviours which could have been existing, sort of that was more negative and provoking. You could focus on where calmness could be, where you've got a dial, you could turn things down, or you could not always see that you're in the now more, and you could be more into ears and what's valuable. You could build orders of a more where your presence is more in associated as well as being dissociated as anybody showed up. You could really be calling out more for what's normal and making an effort for this to be accepted more, and setting enforcing sort of boundaries, personal boundaries and things. And so one should really have good constructive critique and have ease of ability to be able to have constructive critique of themselves, and ignoring or not valuing anybody or what is really a form of stupidity, of course. Yet shame that would be spoken could be very confused and not actual, but one can't stand up for anyone else, and yet who's happy really is really not necessarily of any aggressive sort of outbursts and those sorts of things. But being more aware, being more implicit, being implied, and intuitive is more natural, and so pleasure starts to be more hardwired versus limited mind function. And so otherwise you could see someone really changing topics midsection and making that more wearing people out, talk more that was excessive non-stop, or where movements was just to be fidgeted. And then you've got these Harderian gland, which is a gland around your eyes, the Brunner gland, that is a very large gland in your body which produces north negative, very important. You've got ethmoid organ, which is your magnetic organ, which is lined up to magnetic north. And is it that you've got a proper atlas alignment, and do you have proper central nervous system, working, because you've got a straight spine and things like this. Otherwise, the sleep-wake cycle could be going on. But you can hear people sort of arguing a bit where I am in the background.
I thought maybe you'd be making a meal for everybody like you always do.
Well, I'm in a state of flux where we're doing the show, and in a boarding spot in a moment where people are so interesting, it's funny. But all systems which really is undiagnosed is ongoing, and like what we're talking about, modern medicine's out of keeping people amused while nature's taking its course. Yet most people could be really in hypochondriacal types of conditions where they zone out of conversations and they really don't really have ever much cause of action proper, and because they don't have the nature of the event, and a lot of interruptedness of anybody else's flow could be, and somebody could be more high conflict, and so they're not really in agreement, not seeking agreement, and yet whole brain focusing being practiced and more jump cell rejuvenation, these sorts of things can go hand in hand. And so you've got narcissistic personality disorder, really, where things you get cleared up because somebody could really learn more whole brain functioning, patterning, and proper apologetics and all sorts of things goes on. But where that doesn't, you've got sociopathics, which really is not really any feeling much, whereas somebody else is, you see. And so where flow is, really, where anything is, agreement is, that's for sure. And anybody could point toward what makes things up, and it's a mature person that always makes amends. And so it's persistence and perseverance, and for you, where things are really not necessarily an overdrive, but somebody could be very rigid and have not a proper global, proper condition of rewardedness of things. But things what continuity is, where anything is. But parental alienation could have gone on, and those sorts of things. I mean, then many people could be more passive-aggressive, gossip, and things that's like that could be more and more anger addict and more guilt-trippedness sort of thing. So personality disorder really is like more borderline, and emotional instability really is ongoing, where sort of somebody is distracted but quite calm and smooth voice tone, and thinks it's sort of all something which you could be more felt inside. But to avoid responsibility where something is really, but anywhere calmness is, all things are really proper. But of course, it's a felt guilt, which should be wise where something is a shame and things are, just rules are just not necessarily just skipped over, but something is sort of more long term, where feelings are sort of more where it's clear could have been. But there's patterns of the sociopath, which is really ignoring all the things that's right or wrong and telling anybody, to live, but just taking advantage of things, negative conflicted sort, for sort of long-term, no long-term relation, and no personal sort of boundaries ever been sort of respected and things. So charm really is your capacity, of course, just being organic, but could be just you could see a very manipulative more, where something is just opinionated, and there would have been a lack of proper feeling, but even remorse or revenge, not remorse. And so these are sort of borderline personality disorder, which is really empty eyes. But it's more a fog more of sort of things which is more empty and vacant. Yeah. And so it's really where somebody is gaslighted, is sort of the victim is sort of really made to be, who's at fault sort of thing. But eye awareness really is very warm, of course, and more kind-heartedness, and soft-rolled and more inclusiveness, somewhat, but not passive-aggressive. It's sort of more jabbing, more ongoing, where someone's partneredness is and then backhanded sorts of apologies, which really is a Fox apology more. But if anybody collected any evidence, of course, you could see sort of a lot of blambedness but where confidence is, of course, emptiness is, and trust and faith is, and this sort of really is, oh, people are basically good versus, oh, I grew up and I was ever taught that people were good. So somebody had to have a lot of defense strategies. But narcissistic personality disorder really is a sort revenge more, where planned attack sort of things are and stuff. And this is all coming from like a limited mind function more. And so social sort of siding and all this sort of thing is all kind of more coming from fear of rejection and that. And anyway, the sodium potassium pump and the chlorine molecule and how sweet it is for the liver's function are the very things which cause the fluids to be more thinned and blood to be more unstark. And so whole brain function really is really being good at reframing and being able to look and see whole brain patterning and know how to just to be natural to be able to do this, which is really how you're using your vestibular sense in direction, simple, that's all. And being able to future-pace success where somebody is, and otherwise, lots of people could have these Lewy bodies, which is accumulation in the brain where there's a lot of mental decay and Alzheimer's sort of substance, which is all from this undigested protein and stuff that could be existing where things are.
That's...
Oh, what questions might we have, mate? Any?
Oh, yeah. A lot of incredible information there, Dr. Job. Thank you so much. I'll just go in order of when they came in.
Yeah.
You kind of already covered this, but maybe you could go in a little deeper because Josh from Down Under was asking about the black amber glycolic. Oh,
okay. Well, the black amber glycolic has a very strong chloride molecule channel, which is it kicks off in conditions and helps the pancreas quick smart as a purgative, and meaning it kicks a condition out, and so there's a way for someone to take that internal. They could learn how to do that. You bring it in with citric acid and then a bit of bicarb, and that's how that's done. And then that's you're laying in a red cloth for 3 hours, and that blue light activates these nitrogenate terpene compounds that's in that, and it's extreme. Of course, it's really quite radical in itself. Yes. So other things is that it has a molecule in it which is a substance you can wake somebody up from a coma, really, and it's a substance which has that molecule, which really is incredible because it actually turns off or oxidative, aerobic glycolysis, which is the breaking down of fats and protein, and nitrogen, which cancer kind of really needs itself. And so, a neoplastic condition really does require nitrogen, and nitrogen and excessive protein is really what the cause of a lot of dysbiosis is of the brain. Yeah.
That reminds me, the protein thing, an old acquaintance, he was, what's he doing? He was doing 30 bananas a day, and now he's doing, he calls it ultra high processed, refined carbohydrate diet, but he was showing his blood tests and how he barely doesn't eat. He makes it a point not to eat any protein, and he's showing how he doesn't have diabetes because diabetes is caused by too much protein and fat.
Okay, all right. Well, first, of course, then cancer could be caused because of toxins, which aren't not natural per se, all kinds of reasons for more multiple cause, but basically caused cells not to have proper oxidative metabolism. That's all. Getting the DNA switch back, that's simple. Where somebody, if they could learn more about what this is. Well, what the question is, mate?
Oh, it wasn't really a question, just, I guess, a comment by the banana rider.
You're making 26 grams of protein out of these talks about in your intestine, and so it's true that when somebody lives a long life because they only drank vodka, like you point out, or they had pizza, and they had coffee, and so they weren't gluttons. They lived a long life, you see. Yeah, they sure did. And they produced all the protein that they needed. So a lot of breatharians, like what you've just pointed out, exist because most people think, well, there's not anything in what they ate. But certainly it is that they lived a long life, where gluttons really don't live a long life. Yes? Okay.
Okay. All right. Medicine Bow wants to know about a spermatocele cyst. Spermatocele, spermatocele.
Is it a cyst that's in the mouth or cyst somewhere else? But cysts always is because this condition of cystic fibrosis is existing, and those cysts are always filled with a fluid, and it always comes from connective tissue, which as synovial fluid, and that material is an excretion of sodium and materials and things, which is a thickened fluid of mucin, and so sacs and these sorts of things can form where someone is, and it is this condition basically of cystic fibrosis, which would be why somebody tunes into that podcast, learns a little bit more about what this is. But it's a sodium chloride channel not functional proper, and this impacts the liver and pancreas and every other organ, and eventually is a primary condition really of some things which could be multiple cause, but this is a primary condition. But it's just less. If you could turn this around because you get a bigger picture, you can heal up the pancreas, and you could learn what to do to support proper pancreatic function versus most people have inflammation of the pancreas and they really are not pursuing something which is more the use of these heat and cold shock protein and using more therapeutics to help clear things up like this. Yeah.
I'm starting to see this grand unifying
totality
that is
versus the theory.
Yeah. Amazing. I guess we used to describe it was a demineralization, and that's kind of the underlying.
When you have to excrete a toxin, rock salt, and your body eventually can't do that, and so that's what this disease is. It is slow but sure, but it is a natural condition of the management of the chloride molecule doesn't exist after a moment, and then you can't get any more energy, and so you have cachexia, and you have muscle wastedness and nerve wastedness and body wastedness because there's no more energy left.
Wow. What about okay, so there's one more question that just came in. Matt says, what implications does the recent geostorm in the ionosphere last weekend have for individual magnetism relating to the Earth?
Sensitives can feel wobbliness sometimes, and where the field reduces or spikes. At the moment, the field is so low, it's reduced so that, we really have not too much good centered force where things are, as magnetic forces drop lower. Where solar flares are, you've got solar winds and things, and then that's impacted with climate changes or metallic particulate and things. So it's sort of an interactive effect of all things going on where lights are and these sorts of things. But our magnetic organ, which is the ethmoid, picks up the micropulsation that comes through the crust of the Earth. And this is supposed to be natural at night, that you only have 8 Hertz cycles. And what would be a reasonable 46 Hertz cycle would be over where somebody's beam is. And these are all things which is artificial and synthetic being, but not letting someone sleep per se or something, you see, because the frequencies and stuff which is being applied, which isn't natural for the night. Yeah? So we become more aware as currency becomes positively inductive, not negatively inductive anymore, and laws become more from the Administrative Council that's formed, and many of them that where we as people then have a voice which sits above the Legislative Assembly and comes to be law. And so that's where we the people fit in. And so it's we the people in charge, but this hasn't been anybody ever done anything much. But these are the things which should be, and it's sort of pre-authorized, pre-ordered, and positive inductive currency could be for the next 210 years, where you have an account, and everybody else does too. And governance is more decentralized, and currency is created from our verified vote, which it should be. And yeah, so you're living in a real proper reset, and so our work is very much about this. But what would be the last question again that Matt asked?
Oh, he was just saying how what is it implications for personal magnetism and how it relates to the Earth. I don't know if you said that yet.
Yeah. Well, what natural occurrence is good, but force multiplied because you've got climate changeedness of things, and where were you where this happened, and what energy was existed that is something which is normal versus what's not so normal per se. But certainly that, a lot more conductivity exists because a lot of artificial magnetic particles and creating a haze line over the Earth at the moment, and it all goes up there, all this material and reflectiveness, as now we've got a bit of a haze there. Could take some time and that could all disappear again. But it's from all the persistent control and stuff that's being used by climate controllers and things. And what would it be but more extreme weather that could be force multiplied, and things which you can see, like Dubai getting flooded and all these places and stuff, and the ocean sort of coming into the city sort of thing. And so can a lot of be controlled asymmetric by weather warfare and things. These are the kinds of things which you could look at and see, and why could somebody deny that that's not so?
Yeah. I just saw today in Tennessee where they banned chemtrails. They're all having beautiful clear skies now. David, thank you so much for your time. I just was looking through my questions. I always think just pull my phone out and all that Dr. Job. But I remember this one time at Job's Longevity in New York City, and I was asking you question after question because I just look up to you for everything. And you were in between clients getting readings, and you had like a little small window of time just to eat something, and I was asking you questions while you were trying to chew your food, and you took the time out of your meal to answer my questions, and so I just wanted to let you know how much I appreciate you.
Oh, mate. Thank you so much. I really, great audience, people tuning in, great work that you're doing as we put things up, and people tuning in from all around the world. These are topics which really are hot and continuous, and really current, and always start with a big bang and going out with a big bang. So I think we've done a really great show today, mate. Yeah. So anyway, love you, mate. Really looking forward for us to catch up to the next show. Every something very different as itself a bit. But eye awareness, how do you create this? What are components of this? How does cystic fibrosis sort of fit in? And what are sort of all sorts of behavioural sorts of conditions and things which you could have more patterning to look at and recognise? Yeah. So those are things which I think we can have given some deeper, more insight in the program today. Anyway, love you, mate. We'll catch up to you in a future show.